Hi, I'm Boris Blade, and I'm the host of Strange But Harmless. I mentioned in passing before that I grew up in a house with spirits. Here's more on that. I believe there was more than one spirit living with us in the house. I have to believe that. The alternative is too alarming for me to ponder. Why do I believe the home was haunted? Well, for one thing, the cold spots that moved around the house. You might feel one at any time, but couldn't really tell where they were. You would feel them as you walked past them, but never seemed to walk through them. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly. It was just strange. And even though there was a heat register in one corner, it always seemed cooler there. I used to sit there in the summer to stay cool, and sometimes Dad would move Mom's favorite chair there in the summer. We didn't have central air. Then there were the balloons. They would just appear and disappear at random. No, I'm just kidding. But you could leave a balloon in any room in the house, upstairs, main floor, or basement, and when you left the house, if you were gone more than an hour or so, the balloon would always gravitate to the same corner in the living room. Even if you closed the basement door, it didn't matter. You guessed it, the corner with the chill. Now the lights. My dad was a fanatic about a lot of things. I told you about our religious upbringing in my last episode. That's a horror story in and of itself. Although it helped shape me into the man I am today, it was a struggle to get here. Is that religiously incorrect to say? That's a new term I'm trying out. Feel free to use it. I think it's more important than politically incorrect these days. At least my soul thinks it is. But I digress. The lights, wow, where to start? We went to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Whenever the doors were open, as my dad would say when he was asked how often we went to church. Did I mention he was a little fanatical? Now Dad would have one of us kids go upstairs, one go to the basement, and one would check the main floor, turning off all the lights. Then he would be the last one out and always lock the door. So many times we would come home, and as we were driving up the road, we could see a light on somewhere in the house, randomly on different floors, including the basement, and invariably, on those nights, the front door would be not only unlocked, but ajar. Spooky, isn't it? And I hated it when Dad would say those dreaded words, "Boris, go down the basement and turn off that light." That basement was scary enough at night, but especially for me. Now, I've only recently started telling people that I'm an empath. I feel things others don't. Now, I've touched on it in a previous episode, and I'll delve deeper into it in the future. The worst part was going up the steps, feeling as if someone was right behind you, reaching for you as you ran at breakneck speed up the steps, just to slam the door behind you, knowing, if only in your head, you barely escaped. Sounds like the world's youngest drama queen, huh? Had you seen things as a child that I had in that house, you would understand. Just listen on. Now, as a small child, I must have been less than 5 years old because my sister wasn't born yet and I still had my own room. I used to see small imp-like creatures sneaking around in the hallway at night. They were no more than 3 or 4 foot tall. I reference a movie called Time Bandits from the 80s. They looked a lot like the little time travelers in that flick, but the movie could not have inspired my visions because this was in the 60s. They would literally tiptoe around like they were looking for something. The first couple times I saw them, I sat up in the bed to get a better look. When one of them spotted me watching, he would alert the others and all ran towards the steps leading downstairs, jumped off the first step, and poof, they disappeared in thin air. The next morning, I thought I had a bad dream, but then realized that I had woke up because I had to pee, so I was awake when I saw it. And once I realized that, I thought there was something wrong with me. The next time I woke up in the middle of the night, I lay still and squinted my eyes to watch. I had my head turned towards the door. All they did was sneak down the hall and into the bathroom. There was a night light in the bathroom, and when they entered the light, they were just gone. Not like poof, they just faded into the light. It was like they were just traveling through to get somewhere else. I don't know. I was only a small, scared child. That was the last night I ever saw him. Fast forward to pre-adolescence Boris. Now my sister and I are too old to sleep in the same room, as my parents explained to me a week before this. Now that night I started sleeping in a room with my 2 older brothers. One was 3 years older than me, the other 6 years my senior. I slept in the top bunk over the middle brother. The oldest had his own bed. This was right around the time these 2 idiots made me afraid of heights. Yeah, I know that sounds dumb, but here's what happened. We used to play this game, I'm sure most kids did, where one kid laid on his back, usually the smallest, and the other 2 would grab his arms and legs, pick him up, and swing him. Lots of fun, if done correctly. Now we had different tricks we did. For one such trick, they would swing me up high enough so that at the apex of the arc, they would let go of my feet and I would come down standing up. They kept a hold of my hands to steady my landing. Cool, right? Sometimes I would start by laying on my stomach. Have I mentioned before that I'm double jointed in my shoulders and elbows? Well, one day they decided to try something different, which of course they neglected to tell me. When they swung me up, they swung me as high as they could. Then they let go of both my hands and feet. I hit the ceiling and came down hard on the floor. From that moment on, I was afraid of heights. I learned this after I got done crying and ran out of the house mad as hell. When I got on my 24-inch bike, the same bike I rode every day, I got a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach and felt real dizzy. I stopped and sat for a minute, shook off the feeling, and took off again. I got over those feelings when on my bike very quickly. Back then I practically lived on my bike. But one thing I did miss after that was climbing trees. I couldn't do that any longer. The dizziness and feeling in my gut was too overpowering the higher I got. Well, at least for a while. I was never one to let emotions get in the way of something I felt strongly about. We had this huge maple tree in our backyard. If I was alone and not on my bike, I was climbing that tree. It was as tall as our 2-story house, and I could get to the top in under 2 minutes. No joking. Under 2 minutes. I timed it when I got my first real watch with a sweep second hand. 1 minute and 45 seconds was my fastest time. Up there, the tree branches were, of course, thinner, and I would hold on and sway with the wind. I was as tall as our house. It was majestic, and the view was breathtaking. Well, for a small child. The first time I climbed to the top of that tree, I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. The lowest branch was too high for me, so I dragged this old wooden table over. I climbed on top of it and jumped as hard and high as I possibly could, and I barely reached the branch. It took me 4 tries to pull myself up enough to get a leg around it. It was the first tree I ever climbed. It became my favorite hiding spot for flashlight tag a few years later. At night, even with Dad's big 6-volt flashlight, you couldn't tell I was up there. I've never told anyone about this, but that tree was like my fortress of solitude. When I felt bad, or really good, or just for shits and giggles, I'd climb the tree. I spent what seemed like hours up there, just thinking and relishing the solitude. I resented my brothers for taking that away from me, even for a while. Maybe the little boy in me still does. I could tell you some stories about me in that tree. I even used my belt to fasten myself to the top and took a nap once. I swear it was like a friend to me. They may have well cut it down. I did climb it again later in life, a few times, but it was never the same. Now it was like an exercise in fortitude, to prove to myself I could still do it, a way of facing my fear, or when dared to. Of course, once I started getting high, I had to go up and smoke a joint on my old friend. I took my neighbor up once to smoke with him. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I used to take friends up there too. We took turns going up first, so we could be the highest one. We had as many as 6 of us at the top swaying in the wind at once when we were small. If our parents had known, oh shit. It was a wonder the top didn't break. We would have been screwed. I guess God had his eye on me even back then, huh? Anywho, back to the spirits. Where was I? Oh yeah. I feared the top bunk due to my newly acquired fear of heights. Dad would put the guardrail on the bed for me every night. It helped me go to sleep. I felt safer. One night, about a week into my new accommodations, Dad forgot to put the guardrail up. Worse yet, it was the first time I went to bed alone in this room. My brothers were staying at friend's house for the night. I was scared to death. I huddled as close to the wall as possible and still couldn't get to sleep. At one point in what must have been the middle of the night, or so it seemed to a scared boy, I rolled over to face my fear. Yeah, right. I don't know why I rolled over, but I did. After a minute or two, I saw a shadow figure as tall as the ceiling enter the room. He was so tall his head came right through the wall above the doorway and through the light fixture as he approached my bed. Talk about scared. But when he lifted his arms and extended them across the side of the bed where the guardrail should have been, I got such a feeling of calm and peace, I went right to sleep. And I know what you're thinking, just another bad dream. But I'm not the only one who saw this guy. Years later, after my father had passed, my mom had remarried and her new husband didn't want to sleep in the same room she shared with my dad. They moved into the same room I just told you about. Now he worked 3rd shift and slept days, and they put foil on the windows to block all the light out so he could sleep. One day he was having a hard time getting to sleep. He rolled over just in time to see a tall shadow figure walk into the room. It jumped up on the side rail of their waterbed and started walking towards the head of the bed. My stepfather, who was a new Christian at the time, prayed, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you, spirit, to leave this house." He told my mother that the spirit turned, ran back down the side rail, jumped off the bed, and disappeared. As far as I know, that spirit was never seen in the house again. My mom told me this story only after I had told her mine. It was a couple of years after her second husband's death. It wasn't until years later that I learned the significance of the cold spots, even longer for the balloons. Both are known to be signs of spirit activity. Mayhap it was a good thing Dad was so fanatical in his faith. Mayhap we needed the extra protection from God. What could have happened if children were raised in a house like that without the spiritual guidance we had? Even if it was over the top? I have used a lot of what I learned from my parents as well as lessons learned growing up in a Holy Roller Church. I always add that I say that with respect and admiration, no ridicule intended. My relationship with God wouldn't be anything akin to what it is now had I been raised by a normal man, hell, a normal Christian man. But Mom kept him and us kids in line and focused. Please share with us your story, even you non-believers. Do you have a strange story, one you never tell anyone because you don't want people to think you're strange? Well, this is a safe place for you. We're all strange here. After all, strange is the new normal. So, let loose, dudes. I'm Boar's Blade. And as always, I'm strange but harmless.